Dit is vir my verskriklik lekker om vanoggend saam met professor Coetzee te gesels. Nou soos ek gesê het, sy is verbonde aan die Rhodes Universiteit. Professor, welcome to GROOTplaas. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please introduce yourself. You are involved, you're at the Rhodes University, but just a quick introduction from your side.
Great, thank you. Yes, I am with Rhodes University's Centre for Biological Control, but I've recently taken up a new position at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, and I'm working, this new role is actually in conjunction with the Centre for Biological Control at Rhodes University, and I manage the Aquatic Weeds Biological Control Program for South Africa.
So let's take a few minutes and focus on water hyacinth. Where does it come from? How did it get to South Africa? Give us a bit of background.
Great. So water hyacinth is a South American plant. It originated in the Amazon basin, very slow moving waters. You can imagine these big lagoons of beds of water hyacinth. And it's got a beautiful purple flower. I'm not sure if your viewers are aware of this fantastically lilac purple flower that intrigued gardeners, botanists, aquatic biologists way back in the late 1800s. And the story goes that a delegate who went to the Louisiana cotton exposition in the late 1800s took this plant to this exposition and gave it out as a gift to people who went along and said, take this with you and go and put it in your ponds, put it in your rivers, and you'll have this gorgeous new plant from the tropics.
Now, the thing is, I love a bit of background. It's also always so nice to hear the background story. Now, when we focus on South Africa, am I right to say that it's seen as a problem in South Africa?
Absolutely, it's our biggest aquatic plant problem. It's the world's worst aquatic weed, and it got to South Africa in the early 1900s. It was identified from the then Cape Flats and first noticed on the Vaal River in 1910. And then by the 1960s, we know it was on Hartbeespoort Dam, where it became a huge problem quite quickly.
Where are some of the hot spots, if I can call it just for a lack of a better word, some of the hot spots in South Africa where you guys have seen and where the problem is almost out of control? And you can correct me here if I'm stating it wrong, but just some of the hot spots.
Hot spots, which we are trying to keep under control. Obviously, Hartbeespoort Dam is a huge one at the moment, and many of the dams in that high-veld, bushveld region of Gauteng in the northwest, so Bonnecourt Dam, Valkop, Rhodekorpies, it's been on Rhodeplaas Dam, but it's being controlled there. Bronkhorstspruit Dam, and then it's on the Crocodile River in Mpumalanga, the Letaba River in Limpopo, all the main rivers in KZN. So it's on the Ongeni River, it's on the Duzi River, it's in Inanda Dam. In the Eastern Cape, it's on the Buffalo River, it's on the Nahoon River, it's on the Suid-Afrika River. So it literally is throughout South Africa.
Now, for somebody who might not know, I think when we look at the water hyacinth, what is it about its characteristics? I mean, why is it such a problem? If we see it on the dams, why do you see it as an invasive plant?
That's a very good question. It's invasive because firstly, it's been freed from what keeps it in check in its native range. So in the Amazon, it's got its natural enemies. And we're talking things like herbivores. And they could be animal herbivores, but they're largely insect herbivores, which keep these plants under control. It's a problem here in South Africa, firstly, because it doesn't have any of these herbivores here because it wasn't introduced with its natural enemies. And then its growth characteristics allow it to reproduce every 7 to 14 days under ideal conditions. So we're talking about nice warm weather and, of course, nutrients. And the nutrients is our big problem in South Africa. So our water quality is very poor. There's a lot of issues we know at the moment with how wastewater treatment works, not compliant. Municipalities are really struggling to treat water to acceptable standards. And so all those nutrients that are coming out of sewage, coming out of industry, coming from agriculture, basically fertilizer for plants is ending up in these systems, and water hyacinth is saying, thank you very much, I'm going to grow as fast as I can and as big as I can. And that's essentially why it's such a problem in South Africa.
So basically, I'm going to prosper on this.
Exactly.
The thing is, we are sitting in 2024, and like you said now, there are a lot of hot spots. How is it being controlled? I mean, what are the efforts being put in to try and control water hyacinth?
So the first thing we need to understand is that water hyacinth is a symptom of a much bigger problem. And as I said, this problem is nutrient quality of the water. We call it eutrophication. So our water bodies are or highly eutrophic. We can call it hypertrophic, which means they're full of nitrates and phosphates.
Yeah.
So the first thing that we need to do is control what's coming into our water. That is the number one thing that we should be spending our money on. Government, local, provincial, municipal should be spending money fixing up our wastewater treatment plants, fixing up what's going into the water. Treating water hyacinth is treating a symptom, but we need to treat it because it has very negative impacts. It has negative impacts on society. You know, people who rely on the boat for tourism. I mean, not the boat. Who rely on the water body for tourism. You know, if you've got a boating company or water skiing or fishing, there's people who rely on water bodies for food. You know, if you rely on fishing, and that's more in the north, further north in Africa, where large populations rely on water bodies, rely on the fish for their daily protein intake. And then, of course, economic. You know, we can't ignore the economic impacts that this plant is having. And then the environmental impacts, which is why I'm so interested in it. This plant smothers the water body. No light can penetrate. There's no oxygen then in the water because there's no little plankton creating oxygen. And so we just get this complete collapse of what should be a functioning aquatic ecosystem. And so to control the plant is very necessary. And we've relied on herbicides. So there's a very big use of glyphosate throughout the world, trying to control this plant. We are trying to reduce our reliance on herbicides. There's obviously mechanical and manual removal, which is it works on smaller water bodies. Large water bodies, trying to remove that amount of biomass is it's almost impossible. You know, people say, well, surely we can use it. There's so much of it. Can't we make fertilizer? Can't we make textiles? And yes, you can. But those are not control options. And so what we work on at the Center for Biological Control and at SAIB is working on biological control, which is essentially reuniting the natural enemies of this plant with the plant. So we go and we find the natural enemies from South America, make sure that they can feed on it, and then introduce them to South Africa.
I must be quite honest with you. It actually sounds profound. It's so simple, but it's also profound. So
yes,
you unite the plant with the bug almost.
Exactly.
That's wonderful.
So it's a fantastic technology, if we can call it a technology, perhaps a biotechnology. And you know, we make what am I trying to say? The insects that we use can only feed on water hyacinth. So the majority of insects in the world can only feed on one plant if they're a herbivore. And so we aim to find those insects associated with water hyacinth that we can then release to control it.
I don't want to put you in the hot seat, but does it seem like we are winning the fight at the moment, if you can call it a fight?
You know, we can win battles, but the war, I think, is still raging. So, as I said, if we don't address our water quality problems, we could win small battles or big battles. You know, I think we have pretty good success with water hyacinth control on Hartbeespoort Dam at the moment, but if we control water hyacinth and we haven't sorted out the water problem, something else is going to come in its place. And what we've seen is things like cyanobacteria or blue-green algae form. They thrive on the nutrients as well. They thrive when there's no plants covering the water surface, because suddenly they get light. So light and nutrients, and we get these huge algal blooms that are toxic. They've got very toxic fumes that can give people breathing problems, asthma. So yes, we can win some small battles on certain systems, but ultimately we have to sort out our water quality.
Yeah, we've got to get ready for the war. Almost.
Exactly. Exactly.
When we look at biological control, just is there indication how long it takes for us before we see we will see a big difference? If you can maybe end off with that, how long do you think it's going to take before we can say, yes, we did it?
Yes. So the aim of biological control is not to eradicate the plant. If we eradicate the plant, then the insects will die and the plant will come back. So with water hyacinth, it's got a huge seed bank. So all those beautiful flowers produce thousands of seeds, and those seeds fall into the water and then settle in the sediment. And so if you think of a system like Hartbeespoort, where the plant's been there since the 60s, and apparently these seeds can last for up to 25 years. We're dealing with a lot of seeds. So every time we, clear 90% of the surface of the water body, light then penetrates again and these little seeds germinate. So what we're trying to do is a new approach to biological control where we continuously release these insects from rearing stations. And so over the last winter, we've really focused on communities who rear the insects themselves obviously with our help. And we constantly release these insects to reduce the duration that the water hyacinth is on the body, on the water body, and then to ensure that any seeds that germinate will get attacked by these biocontrol agents. So in tropical areas where it's nice and warm, we can get success within 3 years. We're in South Africa, the Highveld gets really cold winters, the insects die back in winter. And so we're hoping for a 5 to 8 year scenario where we eventually wipe out the seed bank of this plant.
Professor, this is extremely fascinating, and thank you for your time and just your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Dit was dan nou professor Julie Coetzee